Ryan had always been the type of guy who left work exactly at 6. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. He had his routine down to a science. Pack the laptop, grab the jacket, wave goodbye to whoever was still around, and head straight for the parking lot. 3 months into his new job at the design firm, nothing had changed. He was consistent, reliable, and most importantly, he kept his professional life separate from everything else. His project lead, Diana, was a different story altogether. She lived and breathed her work. Most evenings, when Ryan was packing up to leave, she'd still be at her desk, completely absorbed in whatever she was working on. They'd exchange polite goodbyes, maybe a comment about the weather or the traffic, and that was it. Professional. Clean. Simple. Diana had this reputation around the office. She was sharp, incredibly talented, and honestly a bit intimidating. People respected her but kept their distance. She had this way of focusing on her work that made it clear she wasn't interested in the usual office small talk or politics. Ryan appreciated that about her, even if they'd never had a real conversation beyond work stuff. It was a Thursday evening, somewhere around 9 o'clock, when everything shifted. Ryan had stayed late to finish up some drawings that were due the next morning. He'd been so focused that he hadn't realized everyone else had left hours ago. The office had that strange, quiet feeling it gets when all the computers are humming, but there are no voices, no footsteps, no life. He finally saved his last file and started packing up his things. That's when he noticed the light still on in Diana's office at the end of the hall. He shouldn't have been surprised. Of course she was still there. As he walked past her office, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, she looked up from her screen. Their eyes met for just a second, and instead of the usual tired smile and wave, she actually spoke. "You're always in such a hurry to leave," she said. There wasn't any judgment in her voice, just an observation, maybe even a hint of curiosity. Ryan paused at her doorway, one foot already pointed toward freedom. "Just trying to beat the traffic," he said with a small laugh, though they both knew the traffic was long gone by now. Diana leaned back in her chair, studying him for a moment. "I'm working on these renderings for the Thompson project. Could use a second pair of eyes if you've got time. The deadline's tomorrow afternoon and I'm not quite happy with the lighting." It was a simple request. Completely professional. But something about the way she said it made Ryan hesitate. They'd never worked together like this, just the two of them, after hours. He glanced at his watch, then back at her. "Sure. I can stay for a bit," he heard himself say, surprising even himself. He was standing in her doorway, bag still on his shoulder, not quite committed to staying or leaving. Diana looked past him at the open door, then back at his face. The fluorescent lights from the hallway were casting shadows into her office, and there was indeed a slight draft coming through. "Close the door if you're staying," she said, her voice calm and even. "The hallway draft messes with my concentration." Something about those words hung in the air between them. It was such a simple statement, such a practical request, but the way she said it, the way she was looking at him, made it feel like more than just shutting out a draft. It felt like she was asking him to make a choice, to either stay, really stay, or to go. No half measures. No standing in doorways. Ryan felt his heart beat a little faster. He understood somehow that this wasn't just about renderings or lighting or architecture. This was a line, thin as paper but clear as glass. On one side was the professional relationship they'd had for 3 months. The polite distance, the 6 o'clock exits. On the other side was something undefined, something that made his instincts tell him to be careful. He could have made an excuse. Could have said he actually did need to go, that he'd forgotten something, that the traffic excuse was real. She would have understood. They would have gone back to their polite professional distance, and life would have continued exactly as it had been. Instead, Ryan stepped fully into her office, let his laptop bag slide off his shoulder onto the floor, and reached back to close the door. It clicked shut with a soft final sound. Diana's expression didn't change much, but something flickered in her eyes. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. She gestured to the chair beside her desk, and Ryan pulled it over so he could see her screen. "So the issue is with these 3 exterior shots," she started, switching straight into work mode. "The shadows don't feel natural, like the sun's coming from the wrong angle." For the next hour they worked in comfortable silence, broken only by technical discussions and the occasional shared observation. Ryan found himself impressed by how she thought through problems, the creative solutions she'd suggest, the way she'd completely reimagine something if it wasn't working rather than trying to force it. But there were also these small moments that felt different from any other work session he'd ever had. The way she'd lean back and stretch, rubbing her eyes and letting out a tired sigh. The way she'd actually laugh when one of his suggested changes made the lighting look ridiculous. The way their shoulders would almost touch when they both leaned in to look at a particular detail on the screen. Around 10:30, Diana ordered food from the place downstairs that was somehow still open. She didn't ask Ryan if he wanted anything, just ordered 2 of the same thing and told him he needed to eat because he looked exhausted. It was both bossy and caring in a way that caught him off guard. They ate at her desk, still working, and the conversation started to drift away from just technical stuff. She mentioned she'd been at the firm for 4 years, that she'd actually turned down 2 other job offers because she loved the creative freedom here. She talked about a building she'd seen in Chicago once that had changed the way she thought about design. Ryan found himself talking too, more than he usually did. About why he'd gotten into architecture in the first place, about his college professor who'd inspired him, about his tendency to play it safe in life and how he was trying to be braver about taking creative risks. It was past midnight when they finally finished the renderings. Diana sent them off to the client with visible relief, then closed her laptop and rubbed her face with both hands. "Thank you," she said, looking at him directly. "I mean it. You didn't have to stay." "I wanted to," Ryan said, and he realized it was true. He couldn't remember the last time he'd enjoyed working this much, felt this engaged and alive. They sat there for a moment in the quiet office, surrounded by empty food containers and coffee cups, and Ryan knew something had changed. That closed door had created a space where they'd connected as people, not just colleagues, and now, standing up to finally leave, gathering his things while she did the same, he felt that same flutter of uncertainty in his chest. What had they just started? And more importantly, where would it go from here? The next morning, Ryan woke up feeling different. He couldn't quite explain it, but something had shifted. As he got ready for work, he kept thinking about the night before. The way Diana had laughed at his terrible joke about architectural lighting. The comfortable silence they'd shared. That moment when she'd said thank you and actually meant it, he told himself to relax. They'd just worked late together. That was it. Nothing unusual, nothing complicated. People worked late together all the time. This was normal, except it didn't feel normal. When he got to the office, Diana was already there, of course. She looked up when he walked past her office, gave him a small smile and a nod, then went back to her work. Professional, appropriate, exactly how it should be. But that evening, around 7, she stopped by his desk. "Thompson loved the renderings," she said. "Wants us to move forward with the next phase." "That's great," Ryan replied, genuinely happy. "Listen," Diana continued, lowering her voice slightly. "I've got another project that could use your input. If you're interested in staying late again." "No pressure, though." Ryan looked up at her. She was maintaining that professional tone, but her eyes were asking a different question. Was he interested in more than just the projects? More of those late-night conversations? More of whatever had started between them? "Yeah," he said. "I'm interested." And so it became a pattern. 2, sometimes 3 nights a week, Ryan would stay late. They'd work on projects together, order food, talk about everything and nothing. Each time, Diana would say those same words. "Close the door if you're staying." And each time, Ryan would close it without hesitation. During one of these sessions, about 2 weeks in, things got more personal. They'd finished early and were just sitting there, neither of them in a hurry to leave. "Can I ask you something?" Diana said, spinning her chair to face him directly. "Sure. Why do you always seem so eager to leave? I mean, before we started doing this, you were always out the door at exactly 6. Ryan thought about it. "I guess I've always kept work and life separate. Like strict boundaries. Work is work, home is home, and never the two shall meet." "Why?" He shrugged. "Safer that way, I suppose. Less complicated," Diana nodded slowly. "I get that. I used to be different, you know. More open, more social, had friends at work, went to happy hours, all of that. What changed?" She was quiet for a moment, and Ryan could see her deciding whether to open up. Finally, she spoke. "I got divorced about a year ago. He was a colleague, actually. We worked at the same firm, different departments. When things fell apart between us, it made everything messy. People took sides, there was gossip, it was awful. I ended up leaving that job and coming here. Decided it was easier to just keep everyone at arm's length. I'm sorry, Ryan said, meaning it. Don't be. It taught me something important. But it also made me kind of lonely, you know? I threw myself into work because it was the one thing that made sense. The one thing I could control. Ryan understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. I was engaged once, he found himself saying. About 3 years ago. We were together for 5 years total. Everyone said we were perfect for each other. What happened? I panicked. Got cold feet right before the wedding. Called it off 2 months before the date. It was brutal. I hurt her badly, disappointed everyone, and proved to myself that I was exactly what I feared. Someone who couldn't commit when it mattered. Diana looked at him with understanding, not judgment. Is that why you keep everything at arm's length now? Probably. I tell myself I'm being smart, protecting myself and others, but maybe I'm just being a coward. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their confessions hanging in the air. Then Diana reached over and squeezed his hand just for a second. It was brief, barely anything, but Ryan felt it like electricity. For what it's worth, she said softly, you don't seem like a coward to me. The following week, things intensified in ways neither of them had planned. They were working late again, sitting close together while reviewing blueprints spread across her desk. Diana was pointing at something, explaining her vision for a particular space, and Ryan was nodding along. Their hands were almost touching on the paper, and then they were touching. Neither pulled away. Ryan's heart was pounding. He knew he should move his hand, should maintain that professional distance. But he didn't want to. And clearly neither did Diana. She turned her head to look at him, and he looked back. The air between them felt thick, charged with everything they weren't saying. This is probably a bad idea, Diana whispered. Probably, Ryan agreed, but neither of them moved away. They just sat there, hands touching, eyes locked, both of them knowing exactly what was happening and not stopping it. Diana broke the moment first, pulling back gently. We should be careful, she said, her voice a bit shaky. Yeah, I'm technically your superior. This could get complicated. I know, and we both have our reasons for keeping things simple. We do. Diana stood up, walking to the window. She wrapped her arms around herself, looking out at the city lights. Ryan watched her, wanting to go to her but staying in his chair. There's a little bistro downstairs, she said, still looking out the window. It stays open late. We could grab some real food instead of the usual delivery. What do you think? Ryan understood what she was really asking. Going to the bistro together? Being seen together outside the office, even just the two of them, even late at night when hardly anyone was around. It was another step, another door to close or leave open. He thought about his pattern of running away, his fear of commitment, his safe, careful life where he never risked anything important. Then he thought about how alive he felt during these late nights with Diana, how much he looked forward to them, how she'd opened up to him about her pain and her loneliness, and how he'd done the same. I think that sounds perfect, he said, standing up. Diana turned from the window, and the look on her face made his decision feel right. She grabbed her coat from the back of her chair, and they walked to the door together. She paused there, her hand on the doorknob, and looked back at him with that same expression from the first night. That look that said, choose. Ryan stepped closer, and together they walked out into the hallway, letting the door close behind them. For 2 months, Ryan and Diana kept their relationship a secret. It wasn't official, they never put a label on it, but it was definitely something. They'd stay late together, sometimes working, sometimes just talking. On weekends, they'd meet at Diana's apartment, away from the office and prying eyes. It felt like they were living in a bubble, separate from the real world. Ryan knew it couldn't last forever. Secrets never did, especially in an office where people paid attention to everything. Jessica from Human Resources was the one who noticed. She'd seen them leaving together too many times, had spotted Ryan's car in the parking lot late at night alongside Diana's, had picked up on the way they looked at each other during meetings. One morning, Ryan arrived at work to find people whispering. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but he felt their eyes on him. By lunch, he understood why. Someone had started a rumor. It wasn't entirely false, which made it worse. People were saying that Ryan was getting special treatment, that Diana was giving him the best projects, that he was advancing his career through their relationship rather than through his actual work. Ryan felt sick. This was exactly what Diana had feared, exactly what she'd been through before. And now he'd brought it back into her life. That afternoon, Diana called a meeting. Ryan, herself, and 2 senior partners. The door was open, very deliberately open. Diana's face was professionally blank, but Ryan could see the tension in her shoulders. "We need to discuss Ryan's career development," Diana began, her voice cool and formal. "I've been reviewing his work, and I think he'd benefit from new challenges. The satellite office across town is expanding, and they need someone with his skills. I'm recommending a transfer." Ryan felt like he'd been punched. She was sending him away, protecting herself, protecting her reputation, choosing the safe option. The senior partners nodded along, discussing logistics and timing. Ryan barely heard them. He just stared at Diana, who wouldn't meet his eyes. After the others left, it was just the 2 of them in her office. The door was still open. People were walking by outside, pretending not to look in. Ryan stood there, feeling angry and hurt and confused. "So that's it? You're just shipping me off?" "It's better this way," Diana said, shuffling papers on her desk. Still not looking at him. "For both of us." "Better for who? For your reputation? For the gossip to die down? For your career, actually. This rumor, it's going to follow you here. People won't respect your work. They'll always wonder if you earned your success or if I gave it to you. At the new office, you can start fresh. And what about us?" Diana finally looked up at him, and he could see the pain in her eyes despite her controlled expression. "There is no us. There can't be. I should have known better. I did know better. I just forgot for a while." Ryan wanted to argue, wanted to fight for what they had, but the open door felt like a wall between them. All those eyes outside, all that judgment. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was impossible. He turned to leave, defeated. But then Diana stood up and walked to the door. She stood there for a long moment, her hand on the doorknob, looking out at the hallway full of people who thought they knew the whole story. Then she looked back at Ryan, and he saw something shift in her expression. "Close the door if you're staying," she said quietly. Those words again. The same words from the first night, but now they meant something different. Something bigger. She wasn't asking if he wanted to stay late to work on a project. She was asking if he was willing to stay and fight, to face the gossip, the judgment, the mess they'd created, to risk his career for something that might not even work out. Ryan looked at the open door. He could see Jessica from HR walking past, clearly listening. He could see his coworkers at their desks watching. He thought about the transfer, the fresh start, the easy way out. Then he thought about Diana, standing there vulnerable and brave, giving him a choice. Really giving him a choice, not manipulating or forcing, just offering. He thought about all the times in his life he'd run away. From his engagement, from commitment, from anything that felt too risky or too real. He thought about how that had worked out for him, leaving him safe but alone. And he thought about these past 2 months, the happiest he'd been in years. Ryan walked to the door, aware of all the eyes on him. He looked Diana right in the eyes, making sure she saw his decision, his commitment. Then he closed the door. "I'm staying," he said. "We're going to handle this the right way." Diana let out a breath she'd been holding. "You're sure? This is going to be hard. People are going to talk. It might affect both our careers, I'm sure. Let's go to HR together. Report the relationship officially. Deal with whatever consequences come. But I'm not running away this time." For the first time in weeks, Diana smiled. A real smile, not the professional mask she'd been wearing. "Okay then." They went to HR that afternoon and filed all the proper paperwork. Yes, they were in a relationship. Yes, they understood the company policy. Yes, they were willing to accept whatever accommodations needed to be made to avoid conflicts of interest. Jessica listened to everything, made notes, and told them she'd schedule a meeting with senior management. As they left her office, Ryan felt strangely light despite knowing things were about to get harder. He'd made his choice. He'd closed the door, committed fully, and whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The fallout was worse than Ryan had expected. The company decided that Diana needed to be reassigned to a different department, working on different projects with a different team. It was framed as a lateral move, not a demotion, but everyone knew what it really was. Ryan got to stay in his position, which somehow made him feel worse. The whispers didn't stop, they just changed. Now people said Diana had sacrificed her preferred projects for him, that she'd given up what she loved because he couldn't keep things professional. His co-workers were cold. During meetings, his suggestions were met with skepticism. When he contributed to projects, people found ways to dismiss his input or take credit for his ideas. He was being frozen out slowly but steadily. At home, Diana tried to stay positive. "It'll blow over," she'd say. "People will find something else to talk about. We just need to ride it out." But Ryan could see it wearing on her. She'd come home tired, frustrated, clearly missing the work she'd been doing before. She never said it was his fault, never blamed him, but he blamed himself anyway. 3 weeks into this new reality, Ryan was seriously questioning everything. Was their relationship worth this? Were they being selfish, putting their personal feelings ahead of their professional lives? One particularly bad day, after a meeting where his ideas were completely shut down, Ryan came home ready to suggest they take a break. Maybe if they separated, people would move on. Diana could get her old projects back and things would return to normal. He found Diana sitting on the couch, staring at her laptop with an expression he couldn't read. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting down his bag. She looked up at him. "I got a job offer." Ryan's heart sank. "Where?" "Harrison and Associates. The big firm downtown. They're offering me a senior position, leading their sustainable design division. It's exactly the kind of work I love. Better pay, better title, and most importantly, no baggage. No one there knows about us or cares." "That's great," Ryan said, trying to mean it. "There's a catch, though. They need an answer in 48 hours. The position starts in 2 weeks if I accept." They sat in silence for a while. Ryan knew what he should say, that she should take it, that it was an amazing opportunity, that he didn't want to hold her back. But the words stuck in his throat. "I don't know what to do," Diana admitted. "Part of me wants to take it, to start fresh somewhere without all the judgment and politics. But another part feels like I'd be running away, like I'd be letting them win. Them? Everyone who's been whispering about us. Everyone who thinks we're unprofessional or that our relationship is inappropriate. If I leave, it's like admitting they were right." Ryan sat down next to her. "Or maybe it's just making a smart career move. This isn't about them. It's about what's best for you. But what about us?" Diana turned to face him fully.
"If I take this job, we won't be working together anymore."
"We won't have that shared understanding of each other's day. And honestly, with the hours they're talking about, we'll barely see each other." There it was. The real issue. Not just the job, but what it meant for their relationship. "I need to know something," Diana continued, her voice shaking slightly. "Is this real for you? Because if we're going to make it work with me at a new job, with new pressures and new schedules, I need to know you're committed. Really committed. Not just writing things out until something easier comes along." Ryan felt like he was back in her office, standing in that doorway, being asked to choose. But this time the stakes were higher. This wasn't about closing a door on work hours. This was about their future. He thought about his pattern. The way he'd always kept one foot out the door, always maintained an escape route. How he'd left his fiancée because he got scared. How he'd spent years keeping people at a distance because it was safer. And he thought about Diana, who'd been hurt before, who'd built walls to protect herself, but who'd let him in anyway. Who was asking him directly and honestly if he was all in or all out. "It's real for me," Ryan said, taking her hands. "I know my track record isn't great. I know I have a history of running when things get hard. But Diana, these past months with you, even with all the difficulty and the gossip and the problems, I've been happier than I've been in years. You make me want to be braver. To stop playing it safe." "Pretty words," Diana said, but there was hope in her eyes. "But what does that mean practically?" "It means you should take the job. Not because you're running away, but because it's an incredible opportunity. And it means we'll figure out how to make it work. We'll adjust our schedules, make time for each other, communicate better, whatever it takes, and if it gets hard, then it gets hard." "I'm not going anywhere." Diana searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt. Ryan held her gaze, willing her to see the truth in his words. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, I'm going to take it." "Good. But Ryan, I need you to know something. I can't go through another breakup like my divorce. I can't invest in this relationship and then have you change your mind when things get tough. So I'm asking you now, before I accept this job, before we move forward, Are you absolutely sure? Ryan thought about all his fears. About commitment, about failure, about repeating his past mistakes. The fears were still there. They probably always would be. But he also thought about what his safe, careful life had gotten him. Loneliness, regret, a string of shallow relationships that never meant anything because he never let them. I'm sure, he said. Diana kissed him then, and it felt like a promise. Like they were both choosing consciously and deliberately to build something real despite all the reasons it might not work. She accepted the job the next day. Her last day at their current firm was 2 weeks later. Ryan stayed on, facing the remaining gossip and cold shoulders. But somehow it felt more manageable knowing they'd made a choice together. On her last day, Diana cleaned out her office while Ryan watched from the doorway. When she finished packing, she looked around the room one more time, then walked to where he stood. Ready? She asked. Ryan stepped aside so she could walk through. As she passed, she paused and looked back at the empty office, at the door he was standing beside. Then she smiled at him, and he understood. They were leaving that door, that chapter behind, together. Diana's new job was everything she'd hoped for and more. She came home excited about projects, energized by the creative freedom, clearly thriving in her new environment. Ryan was genuinely happy for her, even as his own work situation remained difficult. 6 months passed. Their relationship survived the transition, but it wasn't easy. Diana worked long hours. Ryan was still dealing with the aftermath of their relationship going public at his firm. They had to be intentional about making time for each other, had to communicate more clearly, had to work at their relationship in ways that weren't romantic, but were necessary. Ryan found himself growing from the challenges. He started speaking up more at work, not letting people dismiss his ideas, slowly earning back respect through the quality of his work rather than worrying about their opinions. He also started thinking about his own career path, whether staying at the firm was really what he wanted. One evening, 8 months after Diana had left, Ryan came home with news of his own. I did something today, he told Diana as they sat down to dinner. I put in my notice. Diana looked up, surprised. You're leaving the firm? Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a while. I'm going to start my own consulting business. Small projects at first, residential stuff, but it's something I've always wanted to do. Just never had the courage, Diana grinned. That's amazing. When did you decide this? I've been planning it for about 2 months. Didn't want to say anything until I was sure, but I'm sure now. They talked through his plans, Diana offering advice from her years of experience, both of them excited about this new chapter. It felt right. Both of them had moved beyond the drama that had brought them together, were building careers they actually wanted rather than just surviving. 3 months after Ryan started his business, Diana suggested they move in together. They found a small house with a spare room they converted into a home office where they could both work when needed. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was good for both of them. Their relationship deepened. The past drama at the firm became just that, the past, something they'd overcome together. 1 year after Diana had taken her new job, Ryan was working late in their home office, putting together a proposal for a client. Diana was at her desk across the room, reviewing plans for a project deadline. It was past midnight when Ryan finally closed his laptop, satisfied with his work. He looked over at Diana, who was still focused on her screen, and felt overwhelmed with love for this woman who'd challenged him to be braver, to commit fully, to stop running from things that mattered. He'd been carrying a ring in his pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. Suddenly, he realized the perfect moment was right now. In their home office, both of them doing the work they loved, tired but happy, building a life together one late night at a time. Diana, he said. She looked up from her computer. Ryan got up and walked over to her desk. She turned her chair to face him, curious about what he was doing. He got down on one knee, pulled out the ring, and said, Will you marry me? Diana's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. But then she started laughing. What? Ryan asked, suddenly nervous. You left the door open, she said, pointing to their home office door, which was indeed half open. Ryan looked at the door, then back at Diana, confused. The first time you closed a door for me, it changed everything, Diana explained, tears running down her face but smiling. Maybe you should close this one too. Ryan understood. He got up, walked to the door, and pushed it firmly closed. Then he returned to his position on one knee. "Diana," he said again, "I'm staying. I've been staying since that first night when you asked me to choose. I'm all in. No escape routes, no backup plans. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, pulling him up and kissing him. "Yes, absolutely yes." They stood there in their closed office, holding each other, both of them thinking about the journey that had brought them here. All the doors they'd closed, all the choices they'd made, all the times they'd chosen each other even when it was hard. Ryan slipped the ring on her finger, and Diana laughed again, this time with pure joy. "You know," she said, "when I first told you to close the door if you were staying, I had no idea where it would lead. Neither did I. But I'm glad I closed it." "Me too." They stayed in that office for a while longer, talking about their future, making plans, dreaming together. The closed door represented everything they'd built, a private space where they could be vulnerable and honest and fully themselves. Eventually, they turned off the lights and headed to bed. But before they left the office, Diana paused at the door, her hand on the handle, and looked back at Ryan with that same expression from the first night, that look that had become so familiar and so meaningful. "Close the door behind you?" she asked, smiling. "Always," Ryan replied, pulling the door shut as they left, and this time neither of them looked back.